his features, his qualities. Shadakya Gopal Mantra Kori Upashan. He was Gopal Upashan. He was worshipping Gopal. Shadakar Gopal Mantra with the 6-syllable mantra. That's a confidential mantra. That just like the mantras that are received at the time of second initiation in ISKCON, these are confidential mantras, and they're chanted internally. So they're not public mantras, unlike Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. We hear the description by Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami in Adi Lila, chapter 7. Chaitanya Charitamrita, he describes there how Sri Sachinandan Gaudhari, he visited Gayadam, and there he received the Dashakar, 10-syllable mantra from Srila Ishwarapuri Prabhupada. Actually, Vrindavan Thakur mentions he received a 10-syllable Gopal mantra, Sri Sachinandan. And also, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he explains that Mahaprabhu received the Mahamantra from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami from Ishwarapuri, because Mahaprabhu subsequently inquired from Ishwarapuri, Kiva Mantra Dilo Goshai, Kiva Mantra, what kind of mantra? And Srila Ishwarapuri replied that Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Chaito Shabhav, Jai Jape Tare Krishna Upajaya Bhav, that you receive Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and Jai Jape, whoever chants that mantra, Tare Krishna Upajaya Bhav, they awaken their bhav, their feelings of attraction to Krishna. I'm chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and therefore it is the Mahamantra through which, by chanting, one receives the ultimate goal of life, Krishna Prema. So we'll hear also that the Brahman, a couple of verses later, will describes that Sadaka Gopal Mantra Kore Upashan is meditating on the 6-syllable Gopal Mantra internally all the time, and he's chanting Krishna. He's chanting the name of Krishna, Krishna 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 Nam. He's chanting all the time. So both of these things, he's also chanting Hare Krishna, and he's meditating on the 6-syllable Gopal Mantra. And also in ISKCON, we're given such mantras at the time of second initiation. And Gopal Navedda Bina, Na Kori Bhojan, that Gopal Navedda Bina, apart from that which is offered prasadam, bhoga, that he offers to this deity, Gopal, he doesn't eat anything. Kante Bal Gopal Bhushan Shalagram. Kante around his neck, he's carrying the Bal Gopal deity, and Bhushan Shalagram, Shalagram, Shila. This is his ornament, Bhushan Shalagram Shila. It's interesting. We can see Vaishnav Bhushan, Shadu Bhushan, Titikshava Karunika, Shuridam Shavadehana Majata Shatrava Shanta Shadava Shadu Bhushan. Kapil Muni describes the qualities of the sadhu. And here the Bhushan, the actual decorations, the most sublime decoration to adorn oneself with is the Shalagam Shila. Our Srila Jai Pataka Shami Maharaj, I don't know if he still does, but he used to wear a Shalagam Shila on a ring on his finger. There's a very high level of worship, especially those who are wearing around the neck the deity carrying. You see devotees in ISKCON. I know a few devotees in ISKCON. One devotee I know in Vrindavan for many, many years. Well, that was 20 years ago when I met him. And he was carrying Jagannath Baladev Subhadra in like a box, a tissue box size, around his neck the whole time, always. Always, you get up in the morning, you take bath, you put the deity on, go to the temple. It's all day. I mean, that's pretty high level of Krishna consciousness to be able to do that. You can never chill out and go to the deity. Wherever you go, you're like in the deity room. So in this way, this Brahmin was worshipping the Lord and performing devotional service in this way. Parama Brahmanda Teja Oti Onapam. Parama Brahmanda Teja. Param Brahmanda Tejo. So the Brahmanda Tejo, effulgence. These are his decorations, his effulgence. It was great, Parama, great Brahmanda Teja, a great spiritual effulgence enveloped his body, which was Ati Onapam. It was beautiful, so beautiful, extremely beautiful. Ati Onapam. His form was extremely beautiful. And as we heard Gopal Shadaka Gopal mantra, he's meditating on the 6-syllable Gopal mantra. And now text 21 mentions that Nirabade Mukhe Vipra Krishna Krishna Bole. Ontore Govinda Roshe Dui Chaku Dule. So Nirabade Mukhe Vipra, the Brahmin, constantly on his lips, Krishna Krishna Bole, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna. Anyway, says here Krishna Krishna. So that may mean just Krishna Krishna all the time, or Hare Krishna, because in Hare Krishna Maha Mantra also there's Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And Antare Govinda Rashe Dui Chaku Dule. Dui Chaku Dule means he's swinging. His eyes, as he's chanting, this is how he chanted Krishna Krishna. He would be meditating and hearing and relishing the Govinda Rash. In the purport, Sanatana Shastri Thakur explains that he's in the paternal mood, Vatsalya Rosh. Govinda Rosh means, he says, one of the 5 Dasya Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurja Rosh. So he's in the Vatsalya Rosh. Seeing this shining personality, Jagannath Mishra stood up out of respect and then offered his obeisances. And then he received the Vipra, doing everything that's appropriate to receive an esteemed guest. He washed his feet and then offered him an elevated seat. So Sri Thakur was commenting in his purport about Atiti Shaba. And Vyavahar Dharma, on the rule of Vyavahar Dharma, the rule of etiquette. Householders have the opportunity to serve such guests only for one day. This is Vyavahar Dharma. And he says that honoring a guest, in this way, honoring a guest is as good as serving the spiritual master. Oh, that's something we don't hear sufficiently enough in ISKCON, that honoring a guest is as good as serving the spiritual master. Sometimes devotees have the opposite. I mean, the complete other concept that only service to Krishna is serving my guru. In other words, anything else, like serving a guest, does not. Here it says serving a guest means everything else. So many things. I mean, that's serving a guest. That's just household dharma, varnashram dharma. What to speak of distributing books or preaching Krishna consciousness or doing something directly for the mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. I mean, serving guests, of course, that's related to the mission, serving a great Vaishnava, prasadam. But it's just, you do it for any guest, says any guest, anyone who comes to the home. Serving them is as good as serving the spiritual master. Or something etiquette we can further develop in ISKCON. Sometimes not so much in Mayapur. I remember on occasion of being to people's places, and they don't have this idea. It's like you feel like you are a burden when you've come to their place. You know, you may feel like you have a disturbance. You know, they can come and get up. What is this? You know, but actually, it's very important how you receive guests in Vaishnava culture. So then, after the Brahmin had been properly seated, then Jagannath Mishra inquired, what's your place of residence? But sometimes we may visit somebody and it's almost like there's an interrogation. But you have to explain what you're doing there. Of course, we're not referring to in the case where there's ladies alone. Okay, and that's different. Then that's a higher principle there that we wouldn't visit. But when there's people in the house, the guest is received for his washed his feet. We may not wash the feet, but at least give a seat before we, stand at the door and say, "What do you want?" And make them feel like they're being examined before we allow them into the house. But, however, we could see that he could understand he was of elevated consciousness because the behavior that's described. He's carrying the deity of Shalagram Shila and Gopal around his neck. He's constantly, from his lips, constantly in the name of Krishna, and he's enveloped in a tremendous spiritual effulgence, which is so a person like that, you don't really need to ask them. I have sannyasis visit my place here in Mayapur. I mean, I don't say we'll stand at the door and say, what do you want? Or in Australia, as they say, I used to go door to door in Australia, collecting funds for our temples. And in Australia, the people greet you with the statement of, "What's your problem, mate?" What's your problem, mate? It's like, you must, people just come to me with problems. You've come to me, you must have a problem. Otherwise you don't go and see anybody unless you've got a problem. What's your problem, mate? That's how they greet you when you go to the door in Australia. Yeah, what's your problem, mate? Sannyasis visit my place here in Mayapur. I open the door, invite them in. I sit down. As I offer them a seat, offer obeisances, dandavat pranam. And then I give a donation and then they leave. That's it. I offer obeisances and I just give, a couple hundred rupees or something donation. And that's it. They get up, they're happy. But that's, you can talk, have a relationship. They come regularly, ask, "Kemon achen, prochar kemon chochen, bhajan sharan kemon chalche." But actually, you just give the donation, they're satisfied, they go. You don't have to discuss much. It's a spiritual, this is Varnashram Dharma. So then he asks, after he's given him a seat, then he asks the Brahmin, where you come from, and Biprabole, Ami Udashin Deshantari. Bengali is such a exquisite language. Just this word Deshantari, Deshantami. In English, you can't even find a word. Not one word. You have to define that. You have to explain that word with the whole phrase in English. Deshantari, it means a person that literally means that changes countries. Deshantari. And in English, you can't say a person who changes countries. Okay, you have to say a person that wanders from place to place, wanders from country to country. Okay, that's a big half a sentence almost. In Bangla, one word, Deshantari, one who changes his desh. Deshantari. Udashin, in English, how do you find a word for that? Neutral. In English, it's translated a person who's disinterested in worldly affairs. So those phrases in English, which are disinterested in worldly affairs and wandering from country to country, it takes you a full sentence to explain that in English, which in Bangla is 2 words, Udashin Deshantari. So this is Sanskritim. This is Sanskritim. This is such a refined language. Because important, there's the important concepts. In English, we don't have that discrimination. But in Bangla, the language is designed that important concepts are explained very clearly, specifically atta tatta, self, Bhagavat tatta. These types of concepts, they're explained very clearly with special words. You don't have these words in English. Just like in Bangla, 3 letters, guna. In Sanskrit, guna. In Bangla, in English, you'd have the modes of material nature, or qualities, but guna. Yeah. In English, you have to get many different words put it together just to try to create it, just to try to explain the concept, which is one simple word in Sanskrit and Bangla. So he says that I'm udashin deshantari. I'm an indifferent, disinterested in worldly affairs, and therefore I just roam from different countries. In other words, this type of, it's not even possible. It's not very difficult. Perhaps some places in India, you can still live like this as a sadhu. Sadhus, they're in Indian, but sadhus you don't see them just go everywhere. Sadhus go from the one tirthastan to the next tirthastan. And you go to the tirthastan, you see a lot of sadhus. And they don't stay there all the time. They live in dharamshala, or they find some ashram, or they just sleep out on the street and they beg, and they get the food during the day from the temples. Krishna, and then sometimes they'll go to a different tirthastan. It used to be sadhus could travel free on the train in India. Don't know now. But nowadays, udashin deshantari, even in India, and also that the idea being that it's not that you have a base. You have no base. Even in ISKCON, we don't find any udashin deshantari type sannyasis like that. They all have a base. Either it's their place where their responsibilities. They're like a yatra, GBC, or they'll have a base in their place where they're the GBC, or Namhata preaches sannyasis that Bamayapur is the base. They have a base. But this type of udashin deshantari means that he never goes back to some base. He's just always will just wander to the next place. That's a very deep level. That's a very advanced level of udashin, of indifference. Just carrying. But many sadhus in India, you see, not in our movement, many sadhus you find at that level of renunciation in terms of residence. They just carry the juli, and there's a juli, the shoulder bag, and what's in that, or a blanket. I mean, that's very renounced. But there's not that much credit in that now, because it's more like, okay, it's renounced. You're giving up home. It's a griha tyagi. But better to work for the welfare of all humanity by preaching Krishna consciousness, even if you're staying in one place or you're grihastha. It's actually more beneficial for the humanity and spiritually more purifying and more pleasing to Lord Hari if you engage in pushing on the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and have a home, even if you have a base, or even you stay in a home. We've all been staying in one place now for the last more than a year. No one's traveling around, and we're preaching Krishna consciousness. So that's actually more pleasing to the Lord. But here, still this level of, at this time in Mahaprabhu's, we don't need to compare these things, because in Mahaprabhu's mission, we're not talking, in Mahaprabhu's lila, we're not really talking about a mission of Krishna consciousness. It's not relevant to discuss the mission of preaching Krishna consciousness here, because Mahaprabhu is performing lila. This is what's preached. This is what's preached. This guna karma. Sorry, the dibbo gun, dibbo lila of the Lord. This is what's being described. So this character is playing a role in the dibbo lila, and so there's no question of why is he not preaching Krishna consciousness. I mean, And we'll see in subsequent verses that he's Gauranga Shangi Gone Nitta Shiddha Korimane. He's understood as an eternal associate of the Lord that appears whenever the Lord appears. And he appeared when the Lord was performing his pastimes in Brajabhumi. And similarly, the Lord stole his offerings of Bhoga to Gopal then. So it's and this will all be revealed in this description by Srila Vrindavan Thakur. Chiter bikepe matro parjantan kori. Chiter bikepe, that due to my restless heart, chiter bikepe matro, no, only because of that. Parjantan kori, I wander from one place to another. Parjantan kori. What an answer, huh? Just how rare would it be that some person, you ask a person, where are you from? And you get a response like this. And what an extraordinary person, that they say that I have no, and they're not just pretending or joking or some kind of vagabond. They're seriously at this level that I wander from place to place. And my restless heart induces me to wander. Of course, we are discussing the reasons why the sannyasis wander in this way. It's because this is not having a residence this is a principle of a practice in order to sustain renunciation, because you can only have what's in your bag. One thing about traveling a lot is that a real principle is, important principle is travel as light as possible. Otherwise, you're so exhausted dragging all the luggage everywhere. Sometimes people ask me, "Oh, Prabhu, can you take?" I say, "Forget it, you don't carry things when you travel. Just take the minimum, because dragging things everywhere around the place is such exhaustion. And those who are traveling all the time, you imagine. So travel as light as possible. And therefore, just by traveling, you cannot become attached to things, because you cannot take them with you. So you just have what's in your bag, and everything else is provided. So that level of attachment is easy to overcome. That level, that aspect of becoming attached to things is easy to overcome. Prahlad Maharaj explains in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, that when Hiranyakashipu asked him what's the most interesting thing he learned in school, Sada samudvigna dhyam asat grahat. Sada samudvigna dhyam asat grahat. As soon as you become attached, grahat, you become attached. Grahat means that you grab. In English, the word is grahan. You grab it, you don't want to let it go. That's grahan kori. So asat grahat, you become attached to something temporary thing, not a spiritual thing. You become attached to some temporary thing, whatever that might be. Sada samudvigna dhyam. Prahlad Maharaj says that then sada means constantly, samudvigna dhyam. Dhyam means your mind, your meditation, your consciousness is sada, constantly, samudvignam, disturbed. Udvignam is in anxiety. Samudvignam, complete anxiety all the time. And the more temporary things that you're attached to, the more anxiety there is. That you've got to maintain them, you've got to defend them, you've got to somehow or other get the best, make sure no one steals them and cheats, misuses them. There's so much anxiety. So therefore, such sadhus, they don't become attached to anything temporary. They just to minimize that. So they're relieved of so much anxiety. They never have to worry about maintaining things, repairing things, redoing things, rebuilding things. They never have to worry about any of that, which is a person in one place. It's like a lot of your time goes into repairing things and cleaning things and keeping things maintained. A lot of energy has got to go into that. And so the Deshantari, Udashin Deshantari, just one day or 3 days at the most, one day, and then that's it. So he never worries about maintaining it, repairing anything. So much anxiety he's relieved from. And he's saying that chitte bikepe means that restless, but there's reasons for it, as we explained. And in our Krishna consciousness movement, our sannyasis are not really traveling for this reason, although this is a bonus that sannyasis have. But they're not just traveling for the sake of traveling. They're traveling to be able to distribute Krishna consciousness, which to places where it's not there. They have it, they take it, distribute it. It's called, Mahaprabhu was preaching. He traveled to South India. It wasn't there, Harinam Shankirtan. Traveled to South India, distributed the holy name. And our sannyasis, they travel and preach in my country, where I was born, Australia. So there was no Krishna Bhakti there. There was no Harinam Shankirtan there. Mahaprabhu's movement was unknown. And disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they came there. They came there. And set up, they came there without, so many places all over the world. Prabhupada's disciples would just go to the place and just, arrive and then just, rely on Krishna and start preaching Krishna consciousness. And somehow or other, Krishna provided everything and they were able to make established projects. And in due course of time, just like we were recently interviewing Vayashiki Prabhu, who lives in Vrindavan. We're interviewing him about his early experiences in Bangladesh, where he was the first temple president. He was there when they got the first center in Teshkuni Para in Dhaka. And how that was all organized. And then gradually they got a van and then they started traveling, doing programs all throughout Bangladesh. So such men, if they hadn't have, if they had been, they stayed there many years. So they give up their home, they give up all of their attachments and they go to this place. And so they went, there was no followers of Prabhupada. Now in Bangladesh, probably 50,000 serious followers of Prabhupada. Reads Prabhupada's books, chant Hare Krishna regularly, 30 or 40,000 initiated. Some maybe close to 1 lakh who are seriously following. So 100,000 people serious in Krishna consciousness. So such great devotees that sacrificed and became Udashin, Deshantari, and gave up their own comforts of their home and just wandered and relied upon the Lord. They're great souls. And if, as a result of those sacrifices, tens of thousands of people have come to Krishna consciousness. So those great souls are that first generation of Prabhupada's disciples that spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. They're extremely exalted, Mahabhagavatas, very dear to the Lord. And many may not even be seen so much in Krishna consciousness movement now, but that doesn't matter because they've done more than what most of us will do in our whole lives. They sacrificed and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Jagannath Mishra replies that we're so fortunate today that, just you who wander, you wander randomly is so fortunate that you've happened to wander into our home. So immediately he says, and this is also good, not that there's any kind of other, immediately the guest becomes the main focus of the house. And it's not that it says, I'm just going off to the market, you just relax, sit around, make yourself at home. My fridge is over there. If you want a snack, no, nothing like that. Immediately the guest presence becomes the main priority of Jagannath Mishra, and he says, can we please cook for you? And Brahman says, do as you please. So the first thing that Jagannath Mishra was very happy, and he first thing he did was arrange for the kitchen to be cleansed, thoroughly cleansed with cow dung. And then, that's a very high standard, Brahminical standard. People, they don't do that these days. They clean the kitchen every few days. So maybe, a lot of people, they clean the kitchen every few days. They just cook in the pile. The rubbish just piles up. This is Brahminical standard. We were trained in the deity worship in the temple I joined in Melbourne, Mahaprabhu Mandir. Prabhupada installed the deities there, Radha, Bala, Purnitai, Jagannath, Balada, Shubhadra. And we cooked. I used to cook for the deities. And we're trained up that you clean the kitchen. When you go in, you clean the kitchen. The kitchen has to be clean when you start cooking. And when you finish the offering and you brought the prasadam bag and everything has to be clean. Nothing sitting around on the bench or anything like that. Everything, the Krishna's kitchen, perfectly clean the whole time. So it's probably already cleaned the kitchen anyway. But he arranged for the kitchen to be thoroughly cleansed, fresh. And then all the ingredients. And then at that time, the Brahmin had cooked everything. And he sat down. He mentions he sat down. He sat down. Puja is best done sitting. Sitting down. Always stand up and do arati. But the archana, like offering bhoga. Offering bhoga should be done sat down, sitting. Offering bhoga in the temple, since it's a part of the system. You know, put the plate in front of the Lord. These big deities. And the plate is there, and like on the floor of the temple, the deities looking at the offering, big offering. The plates is big offering put in front of the deities. You sit down, offer all the mantras, offer the ashan, offer achamam, offer the bhoga, offer mantra, meditation. And similarly at home, when offering bhoga, it's better to sit down. I mean, Prabhupada is described in New York. We began the movement offering bhoga to the Panchatattva teacher. He mentions that he bowed down and made offering bowing down. So you can do that also. And sitting down is in the Archana Praditi, Vaishnav Tantra for worshipping. Sit down, make asana. You know, there's an asana mantra. And then you sit on that asana and worship the Lord. So as the Brahmin was sitting and offering the bhoga, Sarva Bhuta Anturajami Shri Shachinandan Mone Ache Biprer Diber Darshan. So Sarva Bhuta Anturajami, who's present in the heart of all living beings, Sarva Bhuta Anturajami, present in the heart, Shri Shachinandan. Sri Shachinanda, present in the heart of all beings. Moniache, he decided, Moniache, Bipre Dive Darshan, he decided to show the Brahmin his form, show himself to the Brahmin. So the Brahmin had just begun his meditation when the Lord appeared in his presence. This is the form of the Lord in this form. You see, this is interesting because on one level you're saying the Brahman's meditating and the Lord appears, but this is a unique situation because the Lord happens to be in the next room. The Lord happens to be present doing pastimes in the next room. So he's going to Diben Darshan, he's going to reveal himself to that Brahmin. As that boy, he's just going to wander in now. So this is very interesting. As earlier, Vrindavan Thakur says that E mote nana chale arshadya dekai ballabha prakatya paschat lukai. That in this way, arshadya dekai, the Lord, he shows his opulence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ballabha prakatya. Ballabha prakatya is particularly manifest when he's in the mood of a young child. Ballabha means under 5 years old. So at this time, Satchidananda is probably he's just 4 or 5 years old. A few pastimes now before it moves into the next Oganda Leela. So, he's not really thinking about, he's not really discerning or discriminating that, I shouldn't show my form to the Brahmin, I'm meant to conceal myself. It's like, because in the mood of a young child, he's just like playing. Ballabha prakatya. It's just like play for him. He doesn't consider, when a young child plays without considering the consequences. That's ballabha. So Ballabha Prakatiyo, he manifests the opulence as the Supreme Lord because he has it. So he just decides to show himself to this Brahmin in that form. Dulamoy, Sharba Ange, Murti, Digambar. Dulamoy, it means dust all over his body. Dulamoy, Sarva Ange. There's a beautiful language in Bengali. Dulamoy, Sharba Ange. Sarva Ange. All of his limbs were covered in dust. Dulamoy, Sharba Ange. Dulamoy, Sharba Anga. Murti Digambar is a Digambar, naked. Arang Nayon, Kara Charan. Arang Nayon, reddish eyes. Arang Nayon, Kara Charan, beautiful hands and feet. Shundor, Kara Charan Shundor. His hands and feet were so beautiful. His form of the Lord. Covered in dust, reddish eyes, naked. And he's just a small boy. He reaches out as the Brahma's making the offering. And as the Brahma's looking on, and he takes a handful of the hot rice. So at that time, the Brahmin who's thinking that, he's thinking that this is a great disaster. He doesn't realize the good fortune. Sometimes a great benediction or a great blessing we may see in the beginning as a disaster. It's calling out, hi, hi. And Jagannath Mishra comes running in. He sees Sachinanda smiling, eating the rice. As he was angry, he starts began to chase Nimai, and Nimai jumps up, runs up, jumps up to run away. The Brahmin caught hold of Jagannath Mishra's hand. He says, the boy's young. The boy hasn't got discrimination. There's no point in beating the boy. He won't understand it. He doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong. And in this way, he pacified the anger of Jagannath Mishra. And Jagannath Mishra just sat there with his head in his hands. Bipra bole Mishra dukana babbiho mone. Babbiha money. The Brahmin says that, look, don't be unhappy. Mishra dukana babbiho mone. Don't be unhappy. Jai dine she hobe taha ishar she jane. Jai dine she hobe. The Lord has allocated what we're going to get every day, each day, and there's nothing you can do to change that. This is destiny. Just bring fruits and vegetables, whatever's already here in the house just now, whatever fruit or roots you have, you just bring that. I won't have cooked food today. He's not going to accept that offering. We probably would just say, Krishna probably accepted it before the kid got there. We were so hungry, we'd just eat it, probably. Just see the quality of this Brahman's devotion, that he's not going to accept that. That'll be thrown, discarded, given to the animals. He says, just bring whatever fruits and we wouldn't do that. We probably would say, oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah. He's not going to eat that. Because we heard a little earlier that, he had to vow, he only ate, which was the prasadam. So if there's doubt that it was accepted by the Lord, then he's not going to eat it. This is devotion. This brata of only eating prasadam, this is very pleasing to the Lord. Means that you're only using your tongue to serve the Lord, and you don't allow it to act independent of that. In other words, the tongue, Rishikena Rishikesh Sheva. My tongue is only for the pleasure of Rishikesh. I talk about him, and I taste his remnants. Apart from that, I don't use the tongue. So that's very, this is sadhana practice. Bacha Begam, Jiva Begam, two things. Upadeshamrita Rupa Goswami explains. But also it's showing love, this is showing love. You say we love Krishna, but let me just exclusively use my tongue for your service. Well, that's a serious thing to do. It's a very deep level of service and love. Just like, because the Lord becomes so pleased by that you're exclusively, the Lord tends to become attracted to that type of devotee because the senses are becoming so purified. They're only used to serve me. These Arabic countries, the ladies are completely covered. This gives more pleasure to the man. He's thinking, I'm the exclusive enjoyer of this woman's beauty. I'm the exclusive enjoyer of this woman's beauty. Right? They like that. They don't want that to stop. They don't want other men looking at their wife. This is mundane. But you can understand that nothing exists here without existence in the Supreme. So in a perfect level, that when a devotee exclusively uses the senses, when a devotee uses the senses exclusively for the service of the Lord, and not uses them, the senses are not allowed to act independently of that, then that devotee, that's a method of practice, and it's also a method of perfection. On a perfect level, the devotee acts like this, and then in this way the Lord becomes so attracted to the devotee's purity. So we can, now we'll hear Jagannath Mishra will request the Brahman to cook again, and the leader will go on, but let's see if there's questions. You can take questions. And we'll be interested to hear if there's any questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about the traveling. So one thing is traveling. Also, you can see in 7th canto of Bhagavatam when Prabhupada talks about, Narada Muni talks about Varnashram, chapter 11 to 15. So in one of the chapter, I think chapter 15, they talks about Grihastha ashram. Also, Prabhupada talks there that Grihastha should go for visiting to holy places. This is one of the rule for Grihasthas, he was saying. But also one thing is that sometimes in family life, it happens that they have other responsibilities. And if the husband goes for traveling, then wife and children are there. And so thing is that we have one purpose of going and traveling and preaching, but also just like we have seen in Prabhupada's time, Prabhupada sent his Grihasthas devotees to different places. The first 3 couples that he sent to London for starting. And like that, also when you read Prabhupada Amrita, we get this picture. But also we can another idea when you read traditional Grihastha ashram and all, they are much more stationed and stable, stationed at one place. They have different responsibilities. So how to understand that, like Prabhupada's mood of Grihastha ashram, and in Vedic style, how they were more of stationary. So how to understand that?
Well, you don't have, there's the Grihasthas traveling and preach. Now none, but not many. I was doing that, but then, I didn't have kids to look after and stuff. So it's more like a vanaprastha circumstance. And so among vanaprasthas, sannyasis there, but those with kids and everything, you don't see them, especially if they've got a few kids. That's like 10, 15 years of your life. You just the kids, the children's requirements are the main priority. Maybe the husband works and that's it. They look after the kids. Maybe occasionally they go on pilgrimage. If they take the family, it's a big, big thing once a year. I used to travel with devotees from Mathura Desh. Every year we go on to Tirtha Jatra, to different places in India. We've been to so many holy places in India, Dwarka and remote places, South India, Bangladesh. We took them, and remote places, and as well as Jagannath Puri, all the usual places that we go. But when they travel, it's like a big thing, I see the devotees. I know one couple there that organise the programs. they don't have time to wash their clothes. They go for the yatra goes for 10 days. They bring 10 sets of clothes because it's just such a, for everybody, because they just go home and wash them all in the washing machine. Washing clothes for the whole family, it takes hours. So, I mean, these are the things. So generally, you don't see that many families like that traveling. Not regularly. Occasionally, they make a travel. Those who are traveling, generally, it's without encumbrances of children. It's possible. Husband and wife together can travel quite a lot. Or separately, they can travel. Or one can travel. It's easy if the children not there growing up. And then in the case of Prabhupada and like, for example, Malati and I think the Shamsundar, I think Malati and Shamsundar, and they had a daughter, Saraswati. But she was very young. She could walk, and talk, but she didn't I wasn't going to school or anything. So that age also, it's possible. You can just carry the child when you're traveling, you carry the child, and then, child can be, it's more difficult, but it is possible. As the child gets older, it's, the education and everything, you can't just travel. So that's it. And in Vedic times, in Vedic times, you had more extended families. So a big family, like, for example, Srivas Thakur here in Navadip Nam, Srivas Thakur, there were 4 brothers. Sri Ram, Sri Nidhi, Shriman, and Shribash. Sri Ram, Sri Nidhi, Shriman, Shribash. So 4 brothers, and they all had their wives, and they were living there in Shribash Angan. And so if Srivas goes traveling, he can go for a couple of weeks, and then there's all the brothers, and it's not like they're missed that much. So in Vedic times, the families are much bigger, the communities are much more extended, and it's not that everything relied upon that. Like now, this nuclear family, as they call it. It's just mother and father and kids that live in the cities. In the Vedic times, that didn't happen. People lived in the village and had their property and had so many relatives. The extended family, that's what family life means. So you're tied in with a big network of people, then they all have their respective responsibilities, but they all play their role. The kids can travel in that situation may be easier because you can just, everything gets looked after by other relatives around the place. Kids stay and you can travel a little bit. So that's, possibilities. That's more like it was in the Vedic times. Now in ISKCON, like I say, we don't just travel, although, as you said, the duty of Grihastha is to go to holy places, but we don't, in ISKCON, Prabhupada doesn't emphasize that apart from devotees coming to Mayapur and Vrindavan in order to get sadhu sangha, to get inspiration for preaching. Prabhupada he never encourages people to just go to all the holy prayer. All the devotees have to go to Badrinath at least once in their life. This never mentioned by Prabhupada. He doesn't mention so much Tirtha Jatra. We come to Mayapur and Vrindavan for purification and association and rejuvenation to carry on preaching. And if it's not your preaching field, to go to some holy places, Prabhupada didn't encourage devotees to just go wander around to see different holy places, big South Indian temples or the big Chardam Yatra and these things. We never hear Prabhupada encouraging his disciples to do those things when he was present. But in ISKCON devotees, that's quite popular and they do those things. But Prabhupada, you never hear him encouraging people to do that. You go for preaching or you stay and preach in one place. That's the mood. So whatever traveling is required for preaching, we accept. And if it's not required, then we don't travel. As follows.
Thank you very much, Guruji.
Other questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Prabhuji, so you mentioned about honoring guests. So how do we see it in current situation in our context? Whether the guest, it's only for devotees or in general?
Yeah, well, that's the thing that, in this case, the description of how exalted this Brahman is, and it's obvious to Jagadam Mishra that the person is an exalted Brahman. And then I gave the example here in Navadip, sannyasis come and visit me. So, we apply. I mean, I could wash the feet of those sannyasis, the Gaudiya Math sannyasis. They come to my apartment, I could wash their feet. They wouldn't refuse. So fortunate in Mayapur that you can have such trust in such people. You just by you know that they're not cheaters because you know them. But yeah, in the modern times nowadays, living in the cities, we don't do that. We keep the security door and the wire, the net, and they don't open that, and they talk to the person outside the door, and that's it. So if they're not a devotee, so what can we say? We're not saying that you shouldn't do that because that's how degraded the world is now. It's just unfortunate that we don't have. If we had our own communities, let's say, for example, Varnashram-based communities where we didn't live in cities. Grihastas got together and bought land and produced their own food. Then, yeah, of course, you could live like that. Door could be open all the time. Yeah, you have a boundary wall with security. Like I mentioned in Mayapur, our campus, I live outside the campus, but inside the campus, it never happens because there's a boundary wall security. People don't get past the security. So you could have an environment like that with a community of devotees and a boundary wall, and you have your security. And then inside, the doors open and you welcome people. But unfortunate that we compromise and we live in the cities to make money. And, all of these things we have to do. We can't, so many values, householder life and living in the city and being employed by somebody. It just induces you to so many principles and values, Krishna consciousness, that you have to compromise when you do that. So that's why Prabhupada wanted us to live in the rural areas and produce our own food, because we wouldn't have to compromise so many of the principles of Krishna consciousness, principles and culture. So that's the answer. Yeah, we should try to develop such communities.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
Other questions? Let's see. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll carry on from this place where Jagannath Mishra is going to request the Brahmin to cook again. We'll carry on with that in a fortnight's time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.